Welcome back to Blue Jays Express. The Toronto Blue Jays have just taken a hit where they least expected it. A sudden departure, a gap in the coaching staff, and a chain reaction that the front office is desperately trying to contain. Today, we're going to break down what really happened, why this exit could trigger something much bigger, and why Toronto now has zero time to waste. And trust me, you want to stay until the very end of this video because the full story behind this situation is a lot more serious than the headlines make it seem. But before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit like to support the channel. Let's go, Blue Jays. Let's start right where the shock began. Earlier this week, the Toronto Blue Jays officially lost Hunter Mensah, one of the key figures inside their hitting department. Now, on paper, the headline loosely, you know this isn't just a staff shuffle. This is a pressure point, a warning sign, and possibly the start of a deeper structural shakeup. Why? Because Mensah wasn't simply another assistant coach. Inside the clubhouse, he was a stabilizer, a connection point between player development, analytics, and the daily grind of MLB hitters. He understood the personality of every batter, how they responded to adjustments, how they processed information, and how to regulate the emotional ups and downs of a long season. Losing someone like that in November isn't ideal. Losing him without a prepared replacement? That's a red alert. But here is where the plot thickens. And this is the part most fans don't know. This vacancy doesn't just leave the Blue Jays searching for an assistant coach, it puts the entire hitting structure under threat. Because David Popkins, the Blue Jays' current hitting coach, is quietly drawing interest from other MLB teams. Yes, the same Popkins who arrived with a modern approach, who blended analytics and communication like few coaches of his generation, the one the front office sees as the future of the franchise's offensive identity, is suddenly on the radar of clubs looking to reinvent their hitting philosophies. And here's the dangerous part. Every time a staff loses a piece, like Mensah, rival teams know an opportunity has opened. They test the waters, they make calls, they plant ideas. It happens every single offseason. This isn't speculation. This is how MLB works behind the scenes. So now Toronto is looking at a double problem. You didn't just lose your assistant hitting coach. You may be at risk of losing the main architect of your entire offensive system. That is why the urgency today is real. But before we talk about the possible replacements, let's slow down and examine who Popkins is and why losing him would be a far bigger blow than losing Mensah. Popkins, despite being relatively young for a major league coach, has already built a reputation for being one of the sharpest hitting minds in the modern game. He's analytical, but not robotic. He uses data, but he doesn't overwhelm players. He blends biomechanics, discipline, and timing in a way that hitters actually understand. And more importantly, they trust him. If you ask inside the clubhouse who has the clearest voice in offensive adjustments, you hear Popkins' name. Every time. Mensah was the connective tissue. Popkins is the architect. Now imagine losing both within the same winter. That's why Toronto is moving at hyperspeed, not just to replace Mensah, but to stabilize Popkins, to support him, to make sure no other MLB team sees a crack and tries to pull him away. Because if Popkins slips, the entire offensive identity collapses. Now, let's go back to Mensah's departure. Why did it happen? Why now? Well, the answer is simple: opportunity. Teams like the Giants have been restructuring their offensive programs aggressively. They're looking for fresh voices, new philosophies, and coaches with real player development skills. Mensah fits that mold perfectly. He has the respect of hitters, the curiosity of a modern coach, and the adaptability that MLB teams desperately need. For him, this was the right move at the right time. But for Toronto, it's terrible timing. Because the Blue Jays were already planning offensive overhauls for 2025. They were already preparing individualized plans for their core hitters, including Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette, and the new generation of players transitioning from the minors. Those plans required stability. Now, everything is on pause. Everything has to be redesigned. And Popkins is left carrying the load, alone. But here's the twist. This is where things get uncomfortable. Inside MLB, when one coach leaves, it sends a message, a signal. Maybe something isn't working there. Maybe that staff is vulnerable. Maybe we can poach someone else. And that's exactly why Toronto is reacting so quickly. Let me explain the urgency clearly. If the Blue Jays don't lock in a new assistant hitting coach fast, Popkins becomes a target. Not in theory, not in a distant future, right now. Because rival teams know that if you combine a young coach, modern philosophy, excellent communication, and a weakened staff, you get a coach who is suddenly temptable. So yes, Toronto isn't just replacing Mensah. They're protecting Popkins. They're protecting their identity. They're protecting the long-term vision that Ross Atkins and the player development department have been crafting. Now let's talk candidates, because this is where your audience leans forward. The truth is, no official names have leaked. But MLB doesn't work in silence. There are always profiles being studied, calls being made, resumes being sent, and informal conversations happening during off-season meetings. And the type of coach Toronto is looking for is clear. Profile 1. A player development specialist. Someone who understands young hitters, biomechanics, and the analytic tools Toronto uses. The Blue Jays love continuity, so a coach from their own minor league system is a strong possibility. Profile 2. A former MLB hitter with communication skills, Toronto has historically liked bringing in ex-players who can translate data into instincts. Profile 3. A tech-heavy modern coach, the type that's been popping up across MLB. High-speed cameras, motion tracking, swing kinematics, decision-making first philosophy. This is the trend, and Toronto knows it. But the key you must push in the video is this. They need someone fast. Not someone perfect, someone now. Because every day without an assistant coach is one more day in which Popkins carries all the weight. And overstretched coaches are the easiest to lure away. Now let's reveal the deeper concern. The part that will keep your viewers watching until the very end. The Blue Jays offense is entering a crossroads. They have players who need urgent adjustments. Vladdy needs consistency in posture, load, and timing. Bichette needs pitch selection recalibration. Kirk needs a reconstruction of rhythm. And young hitters need guidance through swing decisions and two-strike approaches. You can't rebuild all of that with a single hitting coach. You need a team, a duo, a unit that works like a machine. That's why Mensah's departure hits so hard. It breaks the rhythm. It breaks the balance. It forces Toronto to improvise at a moment when they needed certainty. And that's also why Popkins receiving calls from other teams is so alarming. Because if Popkins leaves, you don't just lose a coach, you lose the system, the philosophy, the communication channels, the progress you've built, and the offseason you've planned. So what does Toronto do now? They follow a simple three-step emergency plan. 1. Lock Popkins in emotionally and structurally. Show him he has control. Give him influence, give him resources, reassure him that he's the centerpiece of the offense. 2. Hire the assistant hitting coach immediately, not next month, not next week, now. Every day lost increases the risk. 3. Rebuild the communication system, fast. Without Mensah, Popkins needs someone who can translate analytics, run video sessions, work one-on-one with hitters, manage early work, align minor league affiliates. This is why Toronto can't afford to take their time. We're in November. Spring training will feel like tomorrow, and hitters don't magically adjust in February. Their real work starts now, in private cages, in labs, in quiet off-season training. Toronto needs someone who can step into that world immediately. And here's the final, most retention-friendly punchline of your video. This isn't just about replacing a coach, it's about preventing a collapse. The Blue Jays are standing on a thin line. On one side, stability, continuity, offensive improvement. On the other, chaos, poaching, and losing the very foundation they've been building. That's why the urgency is real. That's why the search is immediate. And that's why this story is far bigger than a simple staff change. Let me know what you think, Blue Jays fans. Should Toronto promote from within? Bring in a fresh voice? Or do whatever it takes to protect Popkins from being pulled away? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's go, Blue Jays.